the Inspiring Sustainability Podcast. My name is Adam Woodhall, and today I am delighted to welcome Charlotte Morton to join us.
Hello, delighted to be here.
And Charlotte today is somebody who has been a sustainable entrepreneur now for nearly 15 years. And that is longer than I've been in sustainability. But we actually did bump into each other back in the day when we were both based in Leeds, when she set up a mobility startup focused on sustainability. And then she went into the world of anaerobic digestion. She's got so passionate about how to help other businesses. She then also set up an advisory business. She now promotes clean tech, game-changing technologies, as well as being an investor in sustainable startups. So I'm really looking forward to this conversation to find out how an entrepreneur who's been in this industry has, as she told me beforehand, got the battle scars and hopefully learned from them. And so hopefully she can tell us a bit more about some of those journeys that she's had. If you want to find out more about Inspiring Sustainability, you can go to our website, inspiring-sustainability.com, and also please do subscribe to the podcast for our regular series that we have here. Without further ado though, Charlotte, what I think the listeners will be very curious about to hear is tell us a bit about you and your backstory that got you to being starting up that business in Leeds in the noughties.
Gosh, that's a long time ago, but I started really thinking about startup businesses, not startup businesses and sustainability, when I was realising that being a lawyer was probably not where I should spend the rest of my life. I was invited to do an MBA when I was a lawyer by my firm, and I went to London Business School, which offered a whole range of new venture development courses, and then I got excited by the whole prospect of startup businesses and realised that, wow, this could be really exciting and far more exciting than being a lawyer, where you're really just advising businesses rather than taking the decisions yourself, because the companies you're advising take those decisions. And I thought, no, I want to take those decisions. So then the question was, well, okay, you want to start up a business, well, what ideas have you got? And it's actually rather hard to come up with good ideas that are going to make money. And it was in thinking through those ideas that we came up with our first idea, or first business, which was Whizzgo, paid by the hour cars. And in thinking through that idea, we realised actually what I really care about is businesses that are sustainable, that will make a difference, that will help us ensure that we protect this planet on which we depend.
And tell me more about that. What is it that, how do you connect with that planet side of things?
I don't really know where it comes from. My mother used to take me around the garden every time I came home, and she wasn't a very good gardener. The garden was rather a mess, but she would be able to take me round the garden and show me this lovely little plant in amongst the weeds that was beautifully flowering. So I think she taught me the beauty of nature, and of course we are utterly dependent on it. And nature is utterly beautiful. You've only got to look at the Blue Planet series to realise that. Unfortunately, we're in the process of trashing our planet, and it pains me greatly. So anything I can do that will help get us back on track, that's what drives me.
Yeah, interesting. So you started off with Whizzgo, which actually I remember driving a Whizzgo car back in the day when I used to live in Leeds. And tell me a bit about the journey that you went through and sort of challenges that you had, and what led you to the success of basically selling it on as well.
Well, I think it's some of those challenges are very relevant to many of the businesses in sustainability today, or aiming to make a difference. So it was a new concept for a start, a new brand, no one had ever heard of that, but also a concept that required behaviour change. So those three things together made it quite a challenging business. And of course you're trying to change people's behaviour away from something that offers them great freedom and ease. It's easy to own and drive your own car, so why would you give up your car and just borrow one down the road? And how are you going to sell that concept? How are you going to match that ease and freedom that car ownership gives you? So those are many of the challenges we've got today. We're going to have to persuade people to eat less meat. Well, for those people who love their steaks, that's really hard. So it's thinking through things like that are the things that we all in sustainability have to work towards.
What were the sort of, can you give me one of your favourite tools that helped kind of start to get that changing with that first business that you ran?
In terms of tools, do you mean thinking about communicating messages, brands?
The messages, the brands, or just sort of, it might have been an obvious thing, or it might have been a kind of like something that might more hit people subconsciously to get it so that people started using Whizzgo rather than their own kind of personal cars.
Well, that's very interesting. I mean, I think to succeed, you've basically got to start with understanding the problem. Why is it people are not going to give up their car and move to having a card that gives you access to a fleet of cars? It's also recognising, well, are there moments in people's lives when they will make a decision? So they might move house, for example, and they move to a house which doesn't have a car park, or their car goes to its service and unfortunately doesn't pass the MOT, so they've got to get rid of it and they don't have the money to buy a new car. So where are there points in people's lives where they might change their current decision that might trigger action? People who don't own a car, young people who've never had the joy of owning their own car, well, actually, they might see this as a huge benefit, and then if you've never got them used to car ownership, then they don't know what they're missing. So it's really understanding people's behaviour and trying to work out where there are points at which you can influence that behaviour, as well as trying to communicate something that will get people thinking, well, actually, I can have access to a fleet of cars wherever and whenever I want them, and that's equating to the sense of freedom that car ownership gives you. So I think there's a lot of thought, a huge amount of thought in that process. And at the time, I was greatly helped by a branding consultant who helped us think through what the brand meant, how we could use the brand to communicate some of these ideas, and how we could use some marketing materials, again, that would help communicate those ideas, and a range of different messages to try to appeal to different people at different points in their lives. So just constantly trying to evaluate what's going on, rethinking it, rehoning it, trying to get it better, trying to find out what works, trying different things.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think it's just even the name Whizzgo is you've got that within that. And actually, just as a little aside for me, it was Whizzgo which helped mean that I've not owned a car since I started using Whizzgo.
Really?
And
that's great.
And because actually I did have one of those pivot points. Because I had my own car and I was thinking, do I need a car? And I knew that Whizzgo existed, and I had my bike that I was using to cycle around Leeds. But then I had a big pivot change, which was that I walked outside my house one autumn day after there'd been a massive storm. There was a famous storm in the mid-noughties, and basically a very big branch had dropped on my car, and my car was written off.
Yeah.
And so then I had a choice. Like, car was written off, I had money in the bank. Do I buy a new car? Now, I'm setting up a new business at this point, so that money was quite valuable to me.
Yeah.
Or do I give Whizzgo a go? Well, I gave that a go. Actually, as it turned out, even living up in Leeds, where the public transport system not as flourishing as where we're based at the moment, talking from London, it still was very doable, and I didn't actually need the Whizzgo car that much.
Yeah.
And so what I found is actually I was using car less, and then occasionally needing Whizzgo when I couldn't either catch a lift or cycle or use public transport. Yeah. And so I was actually a perfect example of that. I think it's very important is to not to expect that people are going to change when everything's tickety-boo. Yeah. There's a few odd outliers that will do that. Most of the time, it's only when there's something to shifted enough for them to change. So that's very much my experience.
Yeah.
So what happened with Whizzgo then? Because things got sticky in the mid-noughties in the UK and globally, in fact. So what happened with you then?
Well, we'd done quite well, so we had grown. I think we were operating in 15 cities across the UK, so we were, by geography, we were the largest paid-by-the-hour car club business. But of course, a scale business requires consistent ongoing investment. So we had just raised £5 million of investment to carry on growing the business. And then two things happened at the same time. One was Lehman Brothers went down, and two, we had an issue about whether the business qualified for EIS relief, and our offer of £5 million came from a VCT. So, and they
these are kind of like, just for the listeners, these are kind of venture capital technical terms, which we won't go into now, but they were very important, basically.
Effectively, yeah. So the result was that the VCT had to withdraw its offer just before Christmas, which was after Lehman Brothers went down. And for anybody who can remember the time when Lehman Brothers went down, it completely changed the financial landscape. So even people, I remember talking to one potential company that was keen, had been looking at investing in Whizzgo. They typically invested £5 million every month into a similar startup business. They suddenly were worried about their own line of banking from their bank, and banks were withdrawing money. It was a horrendous, a very interesting experience to have lived through, for those of us who can remember it. But in terms of a business needing to raise money to keep going, not funny. And the idea of venture capital just disappeared, because all the VC money could simply go in to replace banks with no risk whatsoever, but a very nice return. So why wouldn't you do that? But obviously, from my perspective as an entrepreneur needing real venture money to scale my business, that disappeared. So we kept going for a few more months, and my investors were very, very supportive, or existing shareholders, but they couldn't follow on. Another lesson for entrepreneurs, that it's very useful for your investor to be able to follow on with the next round. They'd reached their cap. Then ultimately I managed to find some private investors who took the business, decided to put the business into administration to get rid of some of our liabilities, and took it out again. And then they decided that they wanted to move the business on themselves, and they then ultimately, it was bought out by one of our competitors, and that business has now taken it and sold it several years later to one of the big car hire companies, which was always where we saw the business going, because car hire companies buy enormous quantities of cars, and that's your biggest cost as a car club business. So ultimately it ended up where we always intended it to be. It's just I didn't carry on with it to the last point when it might have made some money. But never mind, it was a great experience. The business survived, and I was very happy about that.
Good. So, but my understanding is, though, that those hard knocks didn't knock you down. You got yourself up, dusted yourself down, and continued in a kind of more entrepreneurial role. So what was the next thing that then you did?
Well, I suppose the next thing was sort of a year later, I happened to go on holiday with a friend, and her husband had just set up the Anaerobic Digestion and Biogas Association, which I have to say, it took him quite a while to explain to me what on earth anaerobic digestion was, and I seem to have been spending my life ever since explaining it to everybody else. But ultimately, he just said, well, could you help me out setting up this trade body? And then I got more and more involved, only intended to help out a couple of months. And of course, nearly 9 years later, I'm still here. But that's because anaerobic digestion is an extraordinary technology. It helps on so many areas of sustainability in recycling wastes, organic wastes, generating renewable energy from them, generating biofertilizers, and contributing to 9 of the 17 UN Sustainable Development Goals. So I lucked out, basically, coming across an industry, a technology that completely delivers sort of such a big contribution to something I care so much about.
Well, it's something my comparatively very basic knowledge of anaerobic digestion is that in some ways it does mirror what nature does. As like a human process, many of our human processes are very linear, whereas anaerobic digestion helps plug more into the circular economy, how we create was that a fair?
I think that's completely right. Effectively, anaerobic digestion is one of the first, is the first commercially viable form of the circular economy. So, and yes, I remember I don't know if you remember the film Trashed, but it had a little view of a strawberry plant, watching a plant grow up, the strawberry flower, then turning into a fruit, that fruit staying on there, then rotting because someone didn't pick it remarkably, and then the fruit dropping off and returning back to soil. So in a way, the anaerobic technology is effectively doing that. It's taking organic wastes, all we're doing is extracting the energy from it, and then everything else is left and is returned to soil in the form of biofertilizer. There's a lot more whizzy things you can do with it, but that is fundamentally what's going on.
And would that include the caddy that's sitting in my kitchen at home with my orange peels and etc., which I chuck in after cooking or whatever? Is it that would be going into an anaerobic digester?
Absolutely, yeah. So, and it's extraordinary. You may think that's a very small quantity of food waste or organic material, but in combination, if all of us, there's 10 million tonnes of food waste in the UK being wasted. So at the moment, we are only getting 2.5 million tonnes of that. The rest is going to waste in landfills and incinerators, causing emissions. So it's really valuable stuff. And of course, commercial fertilisers are incredibly energy intensive. And so if we can replace even a proportion of that, it's making a big contribution. In total, this industry can contribute about 4 or 5% of the UK's total greenhouse gas emissions.
Wow.
And globally, with more R&D and more development, of course, because we're still very early stages, we could reduce the world's total emissions by nearly 20%. So it's a huge contributor.
So I'm sure that we could spend the rest of the podcast talking about that.
We could.
But and where actually you've got quite a few other strings to your bow. So I want to give, because actually my understanding is that association for anaerobic digestion that you set up, help run and makes successful. You've then taken some of that and you're kind of wanting to spread the love comparatively about how you've managed to make that operate. So tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, it is very interesting actually, because in thinking through how a trade association works, it is a business like any other business. There's a business model behind it. But many trade associations, particularly in the renewable space, are quite small, but therefore they've got a comparatively large amount of overhead. Therefore, it's not sort of an ideal business model, and you're kind of stuck with just growing one sector. So we realised that actually if we were to take the same team, we could provide services to other associations and support other sectors. And of course, you're intervening in an industry level. So if you come across a wonderful industry like the AD industry that can make such a big contribution, you can facilitate that growth of the whole industry. You can have a huge contribution rather than just being one business in it. So effectively now we've, as you know, we've set up the World Biogas Association because people didn't know what AD or biogas was at a global level. So now that's now starting to make a huge difference. It wrote its first report on food waste a few months ago, already making a big difference. We have set up, we've taken over the Cleantech Innovate event, which is facilitating investment capital into clean tech businesses. So again, the more businesses we can get funded and growing, the better. And we're now looking at what other sectors can we help facilitate the growth of. Textile recycling is a huge contributor to emissions, or rather reducing emissions. And there are various other sectors. So it's now which other sector can we help facilitate or speed up the rate of growth?
Interesting. So in the clean technology, what sort of types of businesses would be at the Clean Technology Innovate event? Well,
we're very keen to focus on showcasing clean tech businesses that will have a game-changing impact. So one example of a business that was the first business, in fact, to present at the first one we put on was Airponics, which I am now on the board of, as we've discussed. So Airponics is a fabulous technology that can revolutionise the growing of food with minimal water input, minimal soil requirements, in fact none. And so this technology, if it grows, is going to allow food to be grown in areas that are massively impacted by climate change, helping people to stay living where they live today so helping to reduce migration, which we're already seeing, and ensuring that people have the food that they need, and preventing starvation as the population grows. So very excited by that technology.
One or two others from the clean technology, because I was at this year's event and I found it really inspiring to see so many technologies being highlighted there that could, as you say, got the real potential to be game-changing. So you've got one or two other sort of favourite ones that you could that come to mind.
Oh, there's all sorts. From memory, there's Aqua 21, which is a fabulous way of distilling water from the atmosphere. Again, obviously, I think anyone who's seen the David Attenborough series has seen how beetles on the top of a desert area can capture moisture from the dew in the early morning, and from the air, and use that to survive. There's another technology that actually with the same inventor as aeroponics that is able to generate energy from renewable from kites, kite power solutions. So all sorts of things that just do things in a completely different way. So these ideas that can make the difference we need, and that's where we need to see as most money going into those ideas.
Right. Yeah. Definitely, and because it's we need to create, for me, the kind of like a momentum behind the game-changing technologies.
Yeah.
Because some of the things that we like, aeroponics is a great example. I think is that it's just natural to think that, of course, we have to use soil to grow things, and it takes somebody a bit wacky to be able to think, no, we don't need soil to grow things, we can do it, and that is potentially going to make a massive difference to being able to keep the population that we've got on the planet fed effectively without the sort of environmental degradation which is happening due to the population that we've got, and the way that we've got agriculture happening at the moment. So I think that's a brilliant example. So so you've now become, as well as being an entrepreneur and an advisor to other businesses, you've become an investor yourself.
Yeah. So I don't invest in many businesses because I think it's very hard to come across good ones that are led by people who are actually going to deliver it, and where the idea is a good idea. It's hard coming up with good ideas. But I got invited to, or rather, talking to somebody who came up with an idea of a fine wine members club, and I know nothing about wine, I can assure you. I do like drinking it, however. So simply because I had made so many mistakes with growing my own businesses, and he hadn't yet started his business, albeit he had this idea, he found talking to me just quite useful because I could point out certain things that he was just about to do that might not end up with the best results. And so I've been on the board of and working with the founder of 67 Pall Mall for, 6 or 7 years now, and it's been really interesting watching that business grow from another perspective, both from an investor perspective and a board member. But what got me very interested about that was that, and why I put my money in it, is because they were so passionate about their idea. And you could see, well, you guys are so passionate about this and you really want to make it happen, and it doesn't exist. So clearly you have spotted something that you want, and it doesn't exist, and you're going to make it happen. And I agree with you, I think it does need to exist, and I can see that you people are going to make it happen. So that's really why I put my money there. But what's so interesting is now there's a link between all the things I'm involved in, because there are many issues in the wine industry about growing grapes in the current climate, or deteriorating climate, and I can see that there's a possibility that you can grow grapes aeroponically. So I certainly love the interaction there. And of course, anaerobic digestion and aeroponics also goes very well in a complementary way, because growing food aeroponically, you still will have a degree of biomass that needs to be recycled, and there is a small amount of energy demand required. And so if you can use your waste biomass to generate this small amount of energy you need and nutrients for your aeroponic system, then so much the better. Yet another circular economy.
So you're looking at circular economy, but you've kind of like got a circular career as well, because it's all kind of all looping around and connecting with each other.
Yeah, a little bit. Yes, I love that. It's fascinating just to see how all these things link together.
So what do you think then, when taking a step back, and what is it that you think are the success factors? What would de-risk a startup for you in terms of what would you so you said about passion. Is there anything else that you'd look for in a business that would make you think if it's there, great, or if it's not there, we've got a problem? Or actually the other way around, there's some things that there might be something in a business that you'd be worried about. Is there any other things that you'd highlight in addition to passion?
Well, I think you've really got to yes, passion is absolutely essential. An idea that you believe does have legs as a business, but then it's all about the person who's leading it being able to think through how to get the business from where it is today to where you want it to be. So the next most important thing is starting to think about that longer term vision. Where do you want to be in, say, 10 years' time? And then thinking through what your strategy is to get it from here to that vision. And being absolutely focused on delivering that vision. Constantly questioning yourself. Am I doing the right thing? Is it going in the right way? Never constantly being flexible to think about all the things that are going on around you and questioning the extent to which any of those will justify you changing what you're doing today. It's a constant refreshing, rethinking, evaluating what's going on and with a focus on that longer term vision as well. And then the next thing is that one of the things I want to think about with Cleantech Innovate is how we can support those businesses in some other way, because what you also want on your boards as a startup is some grey hair. You want that experience of people who've done it, who've made the mistakes, who've also got some knowledge that perhaps you don't in the business. So is that the founder will clearly have a lot of knowledge, but the business might need more knowledge in different areas than your business than you have. So it's being sort of a bit realistic about what your business needs in terms of expertise and experience, what knowledge you've got, identifying the gaps and trying to find people who can complement you and fill those gaps. So it's very much having a board that can help facilitate and support the founder to grow that business, and then putting also an executive team around that person who've again got the capabilities to support the growth of the business to where it's going.
Fascinating. So, I mean, what I'm hearing there is that basically, starting off with a passion, but then you need a strategy for how you're going to achieve that passion. Crucially, self-awareness, so that you're checking yourself. And then, in many senses, the most important thing, an ability to listen to people who've had the experience and take on board their comments, and then work within a team to propel that along.
Yeah, absolutely. But one other thing I'd absolutely say is that at the end of the day, as a founder, this is your business, and you are the only person that knows everything, or is it you are the heart of it. Right, so yes, you do absolutely need to listen to everybody, but at the end of the day, you do need to make your own decisions, and if you really do think you're right, then it is okay to ignore the advice you've been given.
Interesting.
But it's really important to listen to it, but at the end of the day, it is down to you. So have the courage.
So you've still got to be confident in your own belief and your passion.
Yeah.
Stick with your passion. Amazing. So that's we've got so much into half an hour or less. So thank you so much for that. We will include links to those businesses in the show notes for you listeners. What's just, if people don't have time to look at the show notes, what's one link, one website that the listeners could go to which would be able to find out about yourself and the businesses?
Well, I suppose the businesses that's at the core of supporting everything is We Are Orchard Limited, so weareorchard.com. That will link to ADBA, to WBA, to Cleantech Innovate, probably also to Green Gas Trading, which is one of the businesses that allowed me to meet Grant Ashton, who runs 67 Pall Mall.
Okay.
And then we can add links to Aponics and 67.
Great, okay. And then yourself, are you on Twitter or LinkedIn?
Yes, I'm afraid I tweet occasionally, and you can't. LinkedIn is a fabulous means of communicating and meeting people who you wouldn't otherwise meet, and sharing information. So there's some great information on LinkedIn and via Twitter.
Right, okay. So Charlotte Morton on both of them, is it?
Charlotte Morton on LinkedIn. I think it's at Charlotte_ADBA on Twitter.
Right, okay.
Something like that.
We'll put it in the show notes. So brilliant. Well, for you listeners, thank you for being with us. And this is Adam Woodhall. You can find out more about me by following the show on inspiringsustainability.com. Inspiring-sustainability.com. Also through your favourite podcast app, and myself on Twitter and LinkedIn, Adam Woodhall, all one word. So finishing off, thank you, Charlotte, so much for your time and your wisdom and your experience, sharing that with everybody. I really appreciate that. So thank you.
It's been a pleasure, Adam. Thank you.
Thanks very much.